Welcome back, Sega fans, to the podcast where you can't help but listen and think, I should get another. It's the Sega guys back for more Sega gaming chat. With me, Dan the Mega Driver, and the Ren of the Heavens to my Fuxan, it's James the SEGAHolic. Mate, how you doing?
I'm brilliant, mate. Brilliant. How's yourself?
Yeah, not too bad, mate. Not too bad. Finished Persona 3 DLC episode. I keep calling it Operation Episode, I guess, this week. So that's 250 hours of gaming over the past 12 months and that one game alone. And I keep playing the credit song. It's got me a bit emotional, to be honest. So it's an experience I'll not soon forget. But it's like, that's me done. I'm all personaed out for a bit now before I tackle any others. So yeah, it's just playing a bit of Virtua Fighter and yeah, waiting for Yakuza Pirates to come out, mate. How about yourself?
Not much, mate. I'm currently doped up on ibuprofen and cocodamol, mate, because I'm fighting a cold that's swept through the family. Although it feels a bit like a kind of flu, a bit kind of achy. So I've got like my pints worth of Iron Brew here. The tablets have been downed, ready to talk some Sega. But in terms of what I've been doing, mate, I've just been working on a video that may have been out by the time this comes out. It's the Model 2 Saru comparison video, which obviously it's going to be the first kind of video where I've used the OSSC that I got to kind of really capture a lot of footage, and you can really see the difference, you know, in what I was capturing through the RAD2X. It's really, really crisp, combining that OSSC with that retro gaming cables, pack-a-punch SCART.
Yeah.
You have to get one, mate.
Yeah.
Because there's no noise, there's no interference, there's nothing. It's like, it's the closest you're going to get to running like a Saturn on modern TVs, you know, other than, you know, compared it to like a CRT. You know, it's that kind of clarity you're getting. There's just nothing on there. If you put a Saturn through RGB SCART on a CRT, your OSSC, we all get nice filters on with that pack-a-punch cable, mate. It's damn close. So I've been playing about with that, getting that video done. But apart from that, mate, nothing much. I've not had a lot of time for gaming in terms of kind of leisure wise. But I'll get there. I'll get
You
there.
will, mate. I remember the newborn days. So I know the struggle was real. I think GTA 5. When did that come out? 2013. Remember, at that point I was getting one new game pretty much a year, just the one game, and GTA 5 took me 6 months to play through. just that alone.
Bloody hell, man. It'll take me 12 months to play Sega Rally from start to finish these days.
It gets easier. But mate, as always, we're going back to Sega's past, and you know, we're at 102 podcast episodes now. You know, we did 100 and completely
We forgot.
forgot to announce the milestone. But yeah, this will be podcast 102. And in those 102 episodes, it's a game that has come up a lot in various conversations, been nominated for outstanding memories, special moments in Sega game, but we have never had a dedicated Shenmue chat.
Nope.
And I thought it was a good, you know, we talked between ourselves and we thought it was a good opportunity to talk just generally about Shenmue, you know, its legacy, the three games, the importance, the impact it had on us personally and in the industry. And then always an interesting discussion. What is Shenmue's future? And yeah, you know, I know a lot of people are eager to get it, see the story end. You know, it's like Cody Rhodes finished the story. But yeah, it's sometimes the more you think about it, the more challenging you can imagine it being. So we'll start off, you know, with the original games, man. I've got my props here. I've got my physical versions of. I've got the PAL version. This is my original Shenmue, actually, that I got way back in.
That is well loved, mate.
That is well loved. I've played through this so many times. You can see, for those that are listening to the audio podcast, you can see the markings around where I've pulled it in and out of its cardboard sleeve over and over again to play it. So yeah, mate, I think best place to start is, you know, where did you first hear about Shenmue?
So it all went back to the Virtua Fighter kind of RPG project Berkeley. You know, the disc that came with VF3TB, the Japanese Dreamcast. Also, I'd imported one like yourself, April 1999, and with that big orange box, there was a copy of VF3 and a step down converter. You know, so I just at that point you never knew it was going to be Shenmue. It was just this Project Berkeley that we'd all heard about. And you know, if you go back and look at that video now, you can see little hints that Landy's in there, Ryu's design has changed, I think Shenhua is in there as well. So there's kind of nods to where it was going. And I remember watching that demo and thinking, oh, this just looked mind blowing. It was like nothing you'd seen in terms of kind of human movement. It looked even beyond, dare I say, the kind of the Model 3 VF3 tech demo. It looked beyond that. It was like an advancement on that. And then you kind of move forward in time and you get your kind of previews. It becomes Shenmue. You start seeing screenshots and the Edge will start to do kind of previews. The official kind of let's say a Saturn magazine, I think, towards the kind of tail end as they kind of started trying to fill in kind of gaps with very little Saturn news. They were filling in stuff with kind of like Dreamcast stuff. So there was talk of Shenmue, I think, kind of coming through there. But without wanting to kind of jump too far ahead, like obviously I've spoke about the kind of story on here before when I first seen it, and I think seeing it with your own eyes is something altogether magical. It's like I don't think you can put quite into words what it meant at that time to see that game running. And even though it was a Japanese version and you couldn't understand a word of what was going on, I always remember that the words that were being said, they almost kind of faded. All I could hear was the music, and again, whenever I was in the SEGAGuys with Sam, and it just so happened we couldn't have timed it any better that we were in at the time of delivery came in from Japan. His big brown box came in, looks a bit like one of kind of Tom Thumb's, halls from Japan. But also Charlie's opened it up and he's got the kind of the copies of Shenmue that came out there, and he's excited. I didn't even think he expected it to be in there, and he's kind of rushed over and slaps it in the Dreamcast and just loaded it up. And again, Sam and I just stood and watched this little kind of 14, was either 14 or 16-inch telly up in the corner with the Dreamcast tucked behind it, and just watching that opening, intro, and just completely blown away. Just couldn't believe what you were seeing. And I remember Charlie jumping up. I've said before on here, he jumped up triumphantly, big Sega fanboy that he was as well. Charlie, Lord Sega has spoken. He said, I think whenever you seen Shenmue, I think he honestly thought at that point nothing was going to stop this console. It was just a juggernaut. It was like, because also you've been playing like games before that. You've been playing like Sonic Adventure, VF3, Crazy Taxi, Soul Calibur, stuff like that had been kind of out and already showing what the system could do. But Shenmue just looked, and even before you got to actually play the game, this was just witnessing that opening intro. It just felt like even a leap in itself. And it's just what an introduction to a game, mate.
Yeah, and you think about where gaming was in 1999 and how far ahead the Dreamcast was, because the things that always stick out to me are the fishes swimming around in the pond, all the little details and how, obviously they use different character models for the cutscenes than they do in game. Like Ryu has more detail on the cutscenes, but still it's all rendered in game. And the detail on things like Landy's robe, all that,
Mm-hmm.
rich tapestry that you can see in there was absolutely gorgeous. You consider that's 1999, 18 months before we had House of the Dead on the Sega Saturn with its great big blocky textures. You've got Metal Gear Solid that came out in 1999, and it's not even as great as that game is. Solid Snake is just two kind of dark shades
Real
under his
line.
headband and the line through his mouth. So this jump in visual fidelity was incredible. I do remember when I first saw, I got the Virtua Fighter 3 disc, and I put Project Berkeley in, but didn't really know what it was. Just like,
Mm-hmm.
the thing is, by that point, I'd seen enough demos to think, right, well, this is very pretty, what's the actual game going to be about? And I couldn't really, at the time, it didn't really click with me what it was. And it wasn't until the game was featured in CNVG later on that I was like, oh, this is what it's about. And then it was talking about how it's FREE.
It's got to
Was it
say
fully real or eyes open or
full.
whatever?
Is it not full reactive eyes entertainment or
That's
something
the
like
one, yeah.
that?
That buzzword, which didn't quite catch on, but sticks in my mind at least. And at the time, the pictures in CMVG were like of the harbour, talking about how you're exploring this world, and they were saying, the thing that sticks out of me in that preview was we all thought one day we would be exploring huge open worlds, like real worlds, but we didn't think it would be this soon. This is the
Mm.
game, and that's what Shenmue started. That's part of its legacy. That it started that whole trend that pretty much exists today. Open world games owe a lot to Shenmue. So yeah, that's when I first saw it. I saw it in CMVG. I didn't actually see it in motion like you did. I didn't get to see kind of an import version, so I had to wait until the PAL release. But you got yours before. You couldn't wait at all, could you? Because you got the US release.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is that Sam's cousin Ronnie bought a Dreamcast on import as well because of Shenmue, right? And he bought the Japanese version, and him and Sam muddled through bits of it. I'm like, I always remember I walked into Sam's house and him and Ronnie are sitting there, and I'm like, is that Shenmue? Aye. It's in Japanese. I'm like, how do you know what you're doing? We don't, but it's just too good. Like, fair enough. But yeah, the minute the US version came into Charlie's, I picked it up and was able to run it. If I'm trying to think, how did I run that again? It must have been using, was it DC UK had put that action replay?
Yeah, there was a few about
That
by the time it came out, but yeah,
aye,
that had been out, I think.
it was a boot disc that I used to get round. I only had the Japanese console at the time, and it was the US version that I got, and I just could not wait to get my hands on it. But again, I bought the PAL version as well. Like, just I don't know why, but see that blue box. I just love that. I'm not a massive fan of the PAL Dreamcast artwork. Prefer the orange. Everyone knows that. But I just think there's something about Shenmue 1 and two's sleeves. I just think the design, I think because Shenmue's original kind of background is that blue, it just goes so well with it.
Yeah.
So I bought the PAL version as well whenever that came out. So I supported it, you know. I had two copies, and the US one, then I bought the PAL one. So if you had disposable income when you're in your like early
Yeah.
20s, mate, ridiculous. But aye, just it was funny seeing obviously they two try to muddle their way through the Japanese version, but I just getting the US version and then just actually getting to go beyond the initial cutscene and then starting to explore. And you said there as well about how, modern open world games owe a lot to Shenmue. And in a way, of course they do, but they've also dumbed down a lot of what Shenmue did because
Yeah.
Shenmue didn't hold your hand. Like Shenmue basically, like you walked out the front door, it was as random as walking out the front door to go to work in the morning. Like there was no like if you at that time you could get a job later on working in the warehouse with the forklift trucks, go and wait on a bus. You miss the bus, you need to go to the arcade and pass some time, get back to the bus stop to get to work. And it might sound completely mundane, but see doing stuff like that in a game at that time, it was crazy. Like guy I've not seen him for years, boy called Graham Dixon. I met him whenever I used to work. You get a right tour of my Shenmue past here. But I knew Graham because I used to work in Safeway when I was a student, right? And he worked in there. And he came back to mind, he seen Shenmue running. And it wasn't Landy's robe or the movement of, the human fingers or the eyes or anything like that. That mate, he seen forklift trucks racing and he went out and bought a Dreamcast in Shenmue to race forklift trucks. And I was like, Graham, mate, you know that you need to get to like this too before that happens, mate. Like you can't just put it in and race forklifts. But aye, just as a game, it had a phenomenal impact on people who've seen it. And as I say, open world gaming or modern open world gaming does owe a huge debt to Shenmue, but in a way, it's also dumbed down a lot of that kind of, that player kind of intuitiveness, as I should say. Allowing people just to kind of go and explore without having their handheld being like a waypoint. There was no waypoints in Shenmue.
No.
You know what I mean? So it's been dumbed down a lot as time has went on. And I get people will say, well, the worlds are a lot bigger now, which they are, but just being able to just walk out of that world, mate, and just do what you want. Amazing.
Yeah, no, you make a great point there about everything being dumbed down because I hadn't really thought of that, but it really has. People took all Shenmue outdated. But obviously it's a game set in 1986, so even, in law, you can't look at your mobile phone, get GPS on, get Google Maps up or Apple Maps or whatever, and go, right. It's like it's like trying to find the post box or something, you don't know where it is. Look, like today, you just get your phone, you just go, well, where's the nearest post box? But it's like, I don't know, walking out in the 80s, like, well, where's the local post box? Going out and talking to people. I mean, it's like, obviously, I'm not going to say you're trying to find a murderer, which is what Rio's doing, but he literally walks out his door like, you don't know where you're going. You don't know what you're doing. You just walk out that door. And the first NPC that you can walk up to, oh, did you see a black car? And it's like, they'll give you something vague. Oh, that day, the day it thundered, right? And you get little tidbits out of them all. And that eventually, and you've really got to appreciate, the design there, just the elegance of it. Just, it's genius, really. That, if they did that today, it would be checkbox, mission objectives, waypoints. You would have a mini map, and it'd be easy. And part of maybe what polarizes people around Shenmue is the fact that it is very different in that respect because
Mm.
you do have to work and invest and you know embed yourself into that world to progress. Um, and it's still something that stands out today. Uh, I think you get it a little bit with open world games close to the time. They don't hold your hand quite as much, but today, it's completely different, and you don't have anything quite as intimate. I know games like Red Dead Redemption 2, and I'm trying to think of another one. I think maybe Last of Us isn't an open world game, but you can still open up the cupboard doors and everything and go
Mm.
inside everything. But Shenmue just felt like a real lived-in world for the time, and there wasn't anything anywhere near what it was doing. I remember people saying that Ocarina of Time, Shenmue's not a big deal because Ocarina of Time did the day-night cycle and it had an open world. But you look at Ocarina of Time and it's just Ocarina of Time's a brilliant game. I love Ocarina of Time, but you can't diminish Shenmue's achievements by talking about Ocarina of Time because it is at its heart, it's a 3D Zelda game which had already existed. Shenmue was a game unlike anything else that had existed at the time. And
Mm.
I made sure that I picked up my copy, and that was I picked it up with a copy of DCX, which they were selling in shops at the time. Got mine from Game Station, DCX, and this very copy of Shenmue right here, and brought it home. But I think you're talking about the impact and the legacy of the first game. I think it just took us to places that no gamer had really been before, hadn't it?
You see what you were saying there, just the last point about obviously how kind of what Shenmue would be like if it was structured now. Like, it'd be like kind of side missions and little menus and tick boxes and stuff. All you had in Shenmue, if you were away from it for a couple of days, you had to come back and read his diary.
Yeah.
You had to read the notes to catch up with where you were. Like, if it was released today, it would be like, top right hand corner, bing, go and speak to Tom at the hot dog stand. It would tell you where to go, But no, I love the fact that, it just, it never held your hand, mate. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, I can't imagine how your mate was playing it in Japanese though, because
I
the
don't know, mate.
dialogue. There's games like I played a few in Japanese back in the day. I think Resident Evil 2. I remember me and my friend Charlie played the Japanese version of that on like the beta on PlayStation 2. He downloaded it from somewhere, and we muddled our way through that. And like there was things like the collision detection wasn't working, and the walls weren't working, so you could see enemies through walls and stuff. But we played through that. That's like an action game. Shenmue is so dialogue driven. I don't know how
Yeah,
they got through it.
no.
And It's interesting for for a game that is principally a virtual fighter RPG because in terms of combat, there really aren't that many battles, are there? You get your sparring with Fuxan, you get your okay.
Uh,
I mean, there must be about what at most maybe 20 battles that you get throughout the whole runtime of the game. Maybe more, maybe less.
Aye, and the only time there's real kind of combat that's kind of meaningful is obviously the end, 100 man kind of battle. But like you can invest time in getting the move scrolls and training and kind of learning the moves. And there is obviously some Virtua Fighter kind of Akira Yuki moves in there, shoulder dashes and elbow, bashes, and there's a kind of a variant of the double kicks in there as well. Um, but I think in the main, the majority of the kind of fights you get early on are just kind of just QTs, pardon me, so you're not actually in full control of it. You've got in fact, was the fight in the arcade near the end? What's the wee guy's name? That's just totally slipped my mind there. The wee purple baldy
Chai?
guy. Chai, yep. The fight with him, that's even a QT. I'm sure near the end. Is there an element of that that's kind of free to play in terms of kind of you've got full control, but there's not many for it being like a obviously Virtua Fighter being at its roots. It's not laden with combat. It's not
Yeah.
as if you're gonna. It's not like Yakuza where you can just pick shit up and just hit them with it. Like that. I don't like the look of this guy. Here's a bike. Smack. It's like
Yeah. Yeah, so the Yakuza, you're getting into fights every few minutes. You see them running across the street, initiating the battle, and then you beat the snot out of them. Whereas Shenmue, it's very scripted. You don't get into random brawls. I can think of like a handful. You fight the bullies. The one that's got the stem coming out of his mouth. But you will, yeah. And then I think you fight with the bikers at one point. You have a fight in the bar. You have a fight with a few of them outside the U arcade, and then you have the big one. You have two fights with Chai, and I think that's mostly it. A few more that I'm probably forgetting. But it isn't very combat heavy, and it's a shame because the combat I think it's really good. Obviously, you don't have the precision that you'd have with kind of an arcade stick fighter like Virtua Fighter, where you're using the D-pad more because it's a 3D game rather than like a Virtua Fighter game, which is effectively you're still on a 2D field. But it works, and like you were saying, mate, you do use a lot of those same attacks, and yeah, you get more combat in the sequel, which we'll get onto. But yeah, it's even though you get it very sparingly, I think in comparison to maybe what you expected from a Virtua Fighter RPG, it is very playable and complements the rest of the game pretty well.
aye, the combat is very satisfying. Like the sound effects for the moves, they're like right out of Virtua Fighter. My go to was just like as I say, he's got this version of like a kind of like a Kira style kind of dash. I used to use that to stun them, then do that kind of roundhouse kick. That was my kind of go to.
Yeah.
And shamefully, I never bothered too much with the scrolls. If I came across them, then brilliant, I would learn them. But I never went out of my way to go to the park and do training and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, whenever I play Virtua Fighter anyway with Akira, I've got like 4 or 5 moves that I stick to. You know, the more complex ones that put your thumb in knots, I don't bother with them.
Five
But
moves of doom.
aye, like there's some of the moves you can see people that are experts with Akira doing are just terrifying. My fingers aren't fast enough these days for that shit, mate. So, um, I know the combat is great. You would expect that though. I mean, like Yu Suzuki, it's AM2. You would expect that kind of legacy and that heritage to pass over that expertise, especially at that time. Whenever Virtua Fighter games, we weren't waiting nearly 20 years for a new one. We'd had a fair few,
Yeah.
so there was obviously the kind of the groundwork was there for it to put it in there. But I obviously like Ryu's clearly derived from Akira. Not just his move set, but the kind of the plaster on the cheek, and he is. I mean, maybe in an alternate timeline, he is Akira in his younger days. You know, but I don't know. But it's just the combat. It's great for what it needs to be. It doesn't detract for the game too much. It has just what it has to. It feels solid. It feels responsive. It gets the job done, mate.
It does. And yeah, it's funny you mentioned that about Akira because I think the date of births all line up, and it's funny that the you look at the date of births for the Yakuza Like a Dragon guys, and they're all of a similar age as well. In the 80s, obviously Yakuza Zero starts off in the 80s. Oh, you'd imagine a crossover would be brilliant. But anyway, you did make me think just now when you're talking about learning the scrolls because you've got so much side content in there. You've got the old man in the park that you can train with and spar with, and you've got obviously you can do stuff with Tom as well because he teaches you a few moves. And then you've got obviously the tomato store. You go in there, you can get exchange your drink cans. You buy your drinks from the vending machine. Get prizes, get Sega Saturn games to get your Sega Saturn out from underneath the telly. God, can you imagine playing
Brilliant.
that in 1986?
That's the kind of the fourth wall getting broken right there, isn't it? He pulls a Sega Saturn that you're like, what's going on there? It's like, should be a Master System, mate. You've got the wrong console.
Yeah, and
You're
then
10 years too early.
yeah, I know. And then and then of course you've got U Arcade,
Oh,
which
mate.
again, that's kind of a revelation. I don't think before Shenmue you really had anything quite like it. That's this assortment. You'd had mini games, of course, but not like you had, and of course those mini games in U Arcade. Obviously, you had the darts and the QTE machines, but having full Space Harrier and Hang On arcade cabs in there, I don't think there was anything, any other game that had quite done that and had these arcade perfect older games in a far larger one, was there?
A bit. Do you remember whenever you walked in and seen them? It was like, can I play these? But mate, I love QTE Battle, honestly. And it's based on a real arcade game as well.
Yeah, it is.
Final try! It's like, I love that. Hey, boy! It's like, oh, I played that more than I played the actual arcade games, mate. I love QTE Battle. And then see the darts as well. That wee tune. Do, 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 do,
Yep.
do, do. It's just, and the wee hand that looks like the kind of the VR hand that you see in all these bloody VR games now waving about. Ah, what is this? I know the arcade games were phenomenal, mate. Getting to play like Hang On and stuff like that, just amazing. Just and as you say, at that point, it was pretty close to arcade perfect. I know the Saturn obviously got kind of like SEGAGuys versions. I think the Japanese version of Outrun in particular is better than the SEGAGuys PAL one.
Yep.
Remember? So it's like a kind of unlock frame rate kind of mode or something in the Japanese one
Yeah.
you can access. But it was even the level of detail in the arcade, mate. It just captures the vibe of an arcade. It's got the kind of dingy light, the wee guy standing at the desk, the game posters on the wall, the cabinets are just beautifully realised. They've got all the details, little slots, the start buttons, the joysticks, everything about it. They're sitting there with a reattract mode, the wee screens glistening away. Oh, mate, just and that's what else makes Shenmue so rich as well. Like every building you walk into, and you can pretty much walk into any building you want. Like every building was unique. Like every you walk in, it was a unique NPC who had their own wee routine, their own wee life, and their own wee story. And this shop, whether it was a grocery store or an arcade or a travel agent or whatever it was you walked into, a mahjong parlor, anything like that, you walk in these places, they were all so detailed and just you wonder like how have they actually crammed all this in here? There was just so much going on, so much detail.
Yeah. Yeah, there really was. I mean, you could go into is it Heartbeats bar with the pool table? I can't remember if it's Heartbeats, but you get the pool. I remember playing. It was like, I could have gone out and played pool and darts whenever I wanted, but I was playing it all the time in Shenmue. I like darts. That song's stuck in my head because I used to play it for ages. I got to the point where I was pretty good at it. I could throw treble 20s and get the guy behind the car and go, "Hey, that was pretty good." And he gives you a little, gives you
180.
It gives you a little what's it called, gacha toy. Because obviously you had those outside the arcade, and then you had them in, you know, um, Double Eater as well outside the store.
So,
There's
yeah,
just you think about it, there's so much to do in those games. Beyond the main, obviously the main quest, if you call it that, it was just so rich in activities and stuff. And yeah, you'd have to, if you rang anyone up, you'd have to do the old rotary telephone. Uh,
right. I feel like Chris Rock and Lethal Weapon 4. 4. 5.
yeah,
Oh shit, made a mistake. Gotta hang up, start again.
yeah, and yeah, because obviously you have to do that to progress the story as well. Because it'd be like warehouse
Mm.
number 8, father's heaven, mother's earth, and all that sort of stuff. And then, of
Brilliant.
course, everything's all against the schedule because you have the NPCs that are, again, there's nothing else quite like it. Is that the NPCs are all on a schedule. They all have activities that they go through the day. Um, the weather is based on real weather from the region
That's
at
mental.
the
And to
time.
real
Yeah,
weather forecasts were used, so you're literally taking part in that world in real weather conditions from the
yeah,
era. That's mental. Again, 1999.
yeah. And of course, at a certain point, you have to get on the bus to go to the docks and do your job. Which, as you're saying, that riding on the old forklift was enough for your mate to buy a Dreamcast.
That's it, mate. You know what I mean? Forklift trucks. See, you just Sega had to put that in an advert, man. Who knows how many they would have sold?
I did try and convince like anyone who'd listen that it was just basically the best thing ever. I did have a few friends with Dreamcast at the time and did convince a few to buy it. I think even back then it was something of kind of a acquired taste, I would say, because not everyone was absolutely in love with it. Because I was like, oh, it's brilliant, isn't it? It was like, it's all right. Bit
Aye,
slow.
you had to commit to it. You had to believe in the world. You had to become invested in the story. And I think like you had to kind of have that kind of sense of revenge. You had to take on Ryu's vengeance,
Yeah.
and then fuck vengeance, man. I'm going to collect some toys, drink a few cans of Coke, and play some Space Harrier. It's
Yeah.
like, but brilliant.
Yeah, it's just one of those things you have to invest in it, and I think once you allow yourself to be immersed in the world, then it's
Mm.
amazing. Because people like obviously we'll come on to the second game, but people say, oh, the worst thing was waiting. You had to wait for something. Oh, you got to meet him outside your arcade at 8 o'clock. Meet him outside the arcade. Well, it's 11 o'clock now. I've got 9 hours to sit in the arcade and practice QTE. Might go out, see the old mate on his bike, buy him a Coke. I'm so thirsty.
And if I spend all my money, doesn't matter. I'll go home, go to my bed, wake up in the morning, I'll pick up my envelope and away out the door, and we go again. It's
Yeah,
like,
bless you, son. The thing is, I spent so much time on one playthrough just kind of scrimping and saving and thinking, right, I'll carry all this along to the next game.
no,
But yeah, it's hard to think of an area where it didn't really deliver. If you wanted something that is going to be exciting, kind of all action, I can imagine you know, you'd find it a little bit boring. But I, honestly, mate, I can't fault it for what it tried to do. Everything that it set out to achieve, I think it did. Obviously, it didn't tell the whole story, which obviously is an issue with the series that persists to this day. Um,
yes,
but in terms of creating essentially a industry-defining experience that was light years ahead of everything else, with enough variety. I mean, I played for it. The reason why this box looks the way it does, because I played this game over and over and over again, and still do. Um, and there's a hook in there that it wasn't just the story. It wasn't just right. I need to get to the end. It wasn't just one and done. I just enjoy being in that game, and I always will. I think.
aye. And as you say, mate, it's the pacing of it as well. It doesn't try to force you through, doesn't try to rush you. It lets you go at your own, and you can. That's the thing with Shenmue. You can play it at your own pace. If you want to blitz through it, then with experience and knowing the game as we do, you know who to talk to and where to go and where to get to progress. But you don't need to, and that was part of the kind of the brilliance of it. It just allowed you to take on Ryu's story and make it your own. And
Yeah.
that's just what it did was, as you say, what it did in terms of visuals, it was leaps ahead of anything available anywhere. It rivaled, I would say, even as I said before, most Model 3 games. In terms of immersion, level of detail, scope, scale, everything that it did at that time. Again, remembering that we're talking about 1999 here. We're talking about what, 3 GD-ROM discs, so best part of 3 gig. To fit all that stuff on there. These NPCs, we take the whole thing with NPCs for granted now. I think, like, you look at like Grand Theft Auto games, and it's like, and they give you a lip and they fight you back and all that kind of stuff. Now, people in Shenmue didn't necessarily fight you back, but they would, if you bumped into them, they would have a wee quirk to make at you, or they would kind of
Mm.
chastise you if it was an elderly kind of NPC. You would stop and talk to them, and some people would be very chatty, and some would pretty much just give you one word answers akin to telling you to F off. So, you know, it tried to do so much that nothing had done before. And I think that's its legacy, is that everything that you see in kind of modern open world games and the kind of interactivity in them, you can trace the roots of it back to Shenmue.
Yeah, you really can. And just it's interesting what you're saying about there being no time limit. Because it doesn't rush you at all. It's not like you have to find, you have to find your dad's killers by this date. You have to get to this point where you're on the ship to Hong Kong looking for the Chiyu men or anything like that, because obviously that's the way the game ends. There is a end date in the game. When you get to a certain point, you will get a game over. But and it's I think it's in January or something, isn't it? I've never actually gotten it myself, but I've read about it. And I was just thinking, as I was saying earlier, I've been playing a lot of Persona 3 this year, the past 12 months. I've been playing Metaphor, obviously both from Atlas and both from the same director, who with a real focus on a diary and a schedule. And it's like, well, you've got to meet this person at this date. It's in the real world, and you do an activity, and that activity takes a day. It's the antithesis of that, really, because it kind of rushes you through and it kind of puts pressure on you, and like, oh, how can I arrange to meet this guy at school and do this activity and go to the ramen shop and eat this and do this, and that. It's like, whereas in Shenmue it's like, go and do what you want. you know
So,
if you want to play
aye,
Space Area until the game ends, fill your boots.
you need sound like that. What about your father? I'm sorry. I have a high score in Space Harrier, though.
I mean, I used to just go into the U arcade, go onto the jukebox and just put on Final Takeoff and just stand there and just
The
listen to the music.
jukebox, actually, brilliant.
It's just you could just exist in that game, and it was just amazing. And I don't think many other games since have come close. Closest I can think is I do remember that I was playing Grand Theft Auto 5 when it first came out on the Xbox 360, and I think there was a song playing on the radio and the sun was setting, and I was like, this is pretty cool. But it still wasn't Shenmue cool.
And the thing is, as well, mate, obviously, with the first game now, if you want to really have that kind of authentic Japanese experience, you can now play Shenmue Undub if you have
You
a
can.
GDMU, which kind of takes the Japanese version and adds English subtitles, which obviously we got like a full English dub at the time. But I still think the game is more authentic if it's played in Japanese. Now, the Japanese voice acting to Japanese people could be as equally cheesy as the English voice acting is to us, but we just think it sounds cool because it's native language. But
Yeah.
that Shenmue undub is a phenomenal way to play it. Also, it puts in the kind of the Coca-Cola was removed
Yeah.
from the Western version. That's been put back in. They've cleaned up a lot of the kind of the translations. Like, one day I was Chinese, that kind of stuff. The translation errors have been kind of ironed out and fixed as well. So if you are looking to kind of maybe run through it again, or you're new to it, you've got a GDM or even a Dreamcast emulator, can run it. This is a great way to experience the game. If you're looking to play the Dreamcast version, that Shenmue undub, that's the version I've got on my GDMU, and I've played through that version. It's just absolutely brilliant,
Yeah.
superb, great way to play it.
Yeah. I think that's the version I need to start up again because because we'll talk about the sequel in a second. But that's how I've been playing. I've been doing another video for the channel, which might be up by the time I put on this. I'm not sure when I'm putting it out yet, but it's got Shenmue. It's got a clip of Shenmue 2 in it from the Xbox version, and I have to say that I'm not a fan of the dub for that one. The original game on the Dreamcast, I kind of have a lot of affection for, but the Dreamcast dub, that's not Dreamcast dub, the Xbox dub, because it was the only Western translation. Just, I don't know, it feels a bit lacking, and I don't mean lacking as in we know that obviously it's memeable, isn't it? It's the phrase, I suppose, is the Dreamcast one original,
Uh,
but the Xbox one just feels kind of low energy, feels quite phoned in, and it just doesn't. Maybe it's because I'm used to playing it in Japanese, which was how we got the PAL release. But yeah, playing the sequel at the moment, I think playing it in Japanese is definitely the way to go.
100%. It just feels more authentic that way.
Yeah, but the sequel, mate. So, uh, when did you first get your hands on the sequel?
If I was to give you a date, I'd be lying. I can't remember exactly when I got it. Obviously, it was that PAL release that I got. And again, it was run thanks to that, boot disc,
Yeah,
which came in very handy. When we spoke to Neil Randall for
yeah,
DC UK, and he's a guy that it's his fault that was on that cover disc, and Sega gave him into trouble for it. Remember,
yeah.
got DC UK in a bit of hot water. You've released a what for free on the cover? A boot disc? Oh, I didn't know it did that. But no, I did get the PAL version. Now, if I'm looking at timelines for Shenmue 2, 2001 that came out. So when exactly did we get it in 2001? Because if I'm looking at the releases here, it would have been it was September in Japan in November 2001 here. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking I'm pretty much in the throes of PlayStation 2 at that point. Because PlayStation 2 was 2000, wasn't it? Or was that
Yeah,
2001? Aye,
2000.
so
I'm pretty sure it came. Well,
aye,
God,
because it was kind of late 2000s. It was December 2000 we got the PlayStation 2 here. Hold on a minute, I need to check that. I definitely need to check that for release date wise, because I want to get my, where was that again? I March 2000 in Japan. It didn't come out here. November 2000. That's right. It came out over here.
yeah.
So yeah, I was well and truly into the throes of PlayStation 2 by that point. So
Boo.
I know. I drank the Kool-Aid and bought the PS2 at launch. Well, I got it 2 weeks after launch after pre-ordering my unit, and I was pretty much buying every new game I could that was coming out for it. On my lunch break, going to GeForce in Glasgow City Centre, trying to justify spending the money I did on that machine, because I was like, "Give me something that makes me believe." But believe the hype. But no, I was really really enjoyed my PlayStation 2 at that time. So the Dreamcast had criminally become a wee bit of an afterthought at that point. A year on, also the discontinuation had kind of taken place, and PlayStation 2 had a lot of hype behind it. Your mates were getting one, and it was everywhere in the media. So I was kind of more played my PS2, but I did get Shenmue 2. But criminally, I didn't get anywhere near finishing Shenmue 2 until last year. I've still got the final disc to finish. I'm just doing that kind of last section with Shenhue where you're just running through the forest,
Yeah.
so I'm at that kind of stage. But I never committed to Shenmue 2 the way I did the first game. And I think that is purely down to the fact that I had this big, shiny, black, monolithic Sony box sitting there brainwashing me. And I just never ever got round to committing to it the way that I did, so, with the first game. So yeah, I've had it on the GDMU for quite a while. I came middle of last year, I think last summer, I got to sit there and just kind of go through it a bit at a time, committed to it. And I mean that fourth disc is it's a real change of pace. That last disc, it's
Yeah.
like slows right down. Like the QTEs are like jumping over logs or sliding under things, and you're chasing Shenhua through that forest, have a big conversation, chase her again. So I haven't fully finished it, but I do intend to. But the the initial earlier discs they're brilliant, honestly. Like Ren, what a character that guy is,
Yeah.
man. Like the kind of camaraderie with him and Ryu is it's like kind of buddy cop movie style, kind of, you know, like total 1 minute it's like abuse and jokes, and then it's like sarcasm and just mockery. It's got everything thrown in there. So bit gutted that I never kind of committed to it during the day, or back in the day, but no, it was good to kind of go through it. As I say, last summer, just need to try and get my finger out and finish the last disc.
Yeah. The last disc is one of those where you need to, it's one of my favorite kind of experiences, like just in general gaming. And I think there's just something about it that I don't know, it's just like quite magical. And I think it's only a couple of hours long and you can't fail it. It's just it's just it's just like you have to commit to it, sit there for a couple of hours. It's just like an interactive experience, like movie sort of thing. It's just magical. I had to check the dates there as well because I can't quite put my finger on when we got a PlayStation 2. And I think it must have been, I got from memory, I think it was after Christmas 2001. I think someone had kind of an unwanted present, sold it to me and my brother, and we went halves on it. So obviously I was still all in on the Dreamcast, uh, even after no one else was, not even Sega was all in on the Dreamcast in November 2001. But I got Shenmue 2 on release. I was getting similar to where I was at the in the end of the day with the Saturn. Really, I was getting the big games. The last handful on the day of release. Unfortunately, I took my eye off the ball. I think when I got the PS2 and Res was one that I didn't get
Mm.
on release at the time. Didn't play that until later. But yeah, so I got it, and for me, in many ways, I love it a lot more than Shenmue 1. It's not quite as intimate, but in terms of progressing the story and just upping the ante in terms of an open world, and of course by that time we'd had Grand Theft Auto 3, in terms of a full open world. But you look at the detail on things in the Grand Theft Auto 3, the character models, they're much different games in terms of scale and environments, etc. So it felt like a huge step up over the first game. As you're walking out onto like the pier, in Aberdeen, um, and yeah, it just seems so vast, and you're out of this sleepy little Japanese suburb, and you're in this huge sprawling, you know, area in Hong Kong, and there's just something about it. There's a lot more danger about it, I think. Is you're still kind of safe in the first one. You're just leaving home. You're just picking up your allowance from Ine-san, going down, pissing off down the arcade. You get a even when you get a job, you're in there with everyone's really friendly. But like when you're in Shenmue 2, you go out. First thing that happens is you get that guy taking the photograph of you. Someone steals your rucksack.
Was it
You know,
hey pretty boy or something? It's like
yeah. And then obviously you lose everything. I remember back in the day, I was just like, when they said, "Oh, they took all," it was like, "Where's the money?" And I was just like, Oh, like, this is my meant to be my perfect save with all had carried forward all my toys and everything that I'd collected. But like all the money that I'd save, thinking, you know, I'll start Shenmue 2 off with loads of money, go in there, and like it was all gone. I was like, bollocks.
Is it?
And then,
Is it? The wee guy Wong into it? Is it? He steals your bag
yeah,
into it.
yeah,
He masquerades as being chased by these guys, and you run down that lane and you get jumped.
yeah, that's
He
it.
flings the bag over, and you're like, "Yeah, wee dick." It's like
Yeah,
I'm trying to help you. You're preying on my good nature here.
yeah, exactly. You see him like skipping on the fountain later, don't you? And then
Oh
obviously
yeah.
you end up. Oh, what's the guy called with the boombox on his shoulder? I can't remember his name. Obviously, you
Uh,
duff them all up at one point, but they'll you end
but
up all being
every
mates, and
every time he appears, it's I don't know what song it is it's playing, but it's just this kind of it's like
yeah.
this big
I
boombox.
can't remember. I looked it up once, and I was listening to it on YouTube. It's only like a minute long, so that's why it was always playing the same bit over and over again.
Oh,
And then you have Joy's theme kicking in. You've never met a woman quite like her.
the red hair and the motorbike.
Yeah.
But as you
Um,
say, that sense of danger right at the start, like you get harassed for the photograph, and then also the woman that's on the kind of the boat will say to you, you know, or he'll try and sell that to you later, but you don't have to
yeah.
buy it, but he'll be persistent, and then you walk by the warehouse and the guy, the really sleazy looking guy, tries to get you to come in to do the arm wrestling. He
Yeah.
just looks fucking dodgy, doesn't he?
Yeah.
It's like, hey, you want to gamble? Think you can win? And it's like this big.
Yeah.
It's like giving all that, and then aye, you lose your money.
Yeah. It's and then even when later on you're getting jobs and you're getting your little odd jobs that are like lucky hit tables and everything, aren't you? And you're just shouting at people, "Hey, come and play a game of lucky hit." And people are just like, "Oh, no
Oh mate,
thanks."
that's brilliant. But it's never you get the first person that actually decides to come over and play, you're like, woo, because mind you, you're man in the stall for the wee guy, and
Yeah.
if you don't, he gives you 300s.
Yeah.
He gives you to
300,
start with. Aye. And then if he
300
comes
ain't
back
gonna.
at the end of the shift and you feel lost money, he gives you a bollocking.
Yeah, that's the thing, in it. Like you'd be shouting at everyone, "Yeah, come and play a game of Lucky Hit," and you see them all going off, and then you see one who's just making a beeline coming straight for you, and you're just like, "Yes, we're in here," and he comes in and just absolutely rinses you. It's like, "Yes," and you're just like, "Fuck it." The owner comes over, and is like, "Oh, you lost me money." Oh,
Oh,
it's
what a game, man.
it is, and you get so invested in a lot of it so quickly. It's amazing how you build up these relationships, and it all becomes part of the routine. You're staying at the different places. You get like the inn at the very beginning, and you kind of move around. You get you'll be at the Lucky Hit stand. Later on, you're in kind of um, when you're looking for Zuyandar, and you're kind of at the temple, and you're moving the books around. That's another bit that's just kind of you try and describe it to someone. It sounds like so banal and inane that you're just carrying these books around. But the whole vibe when you try and doing the QTs not to drop them and that music's going off, it's just magic. I think it's just absolutely beautiful.
But mate, whenever you're working in the shift carrying those boxes, you're sure, you're
Yeah,
sure. And then if you press the wrong button, you're sure, and he drops it. It's like,
and he gives you a bollocking as well, doesn't he?
you're sure. It's like, and you press the right direction. It's like,
That's the thing, isn't it? Because like when you cock up the forklifts, you can come last in the forklift race and just piss about and barely move any crates around, and everyone's like, "Oh well, you didn't meet quota, you don't get a bonus." In this one, people get genuinely angry when you piss when you muck up.
because
And then,
how many times have you played it? Did you kind of like just take the piss and just press the wrong direction on purpose to see what happens?
yeah,
It's like,
you're sure. But yeah, it's and then obviously you get to Kowloon, which kind of ups the stakes again because that's
mm,
obviously a much more kind of oppressive atmosphere. You're in that great big walled city. Um, and you know there's a lot more crime there. Obviously, Ren's come with you because it's at the end of this. It's, no, it's disc three, isn't it? It's disc three where you're handcuffed to him, and that's
Aye.
where it ends up like a buddy cop. And I do love. I get oh, God, I love all of it really. But I love that whole disc three where you've got the big crime boss, Do New, keeps going, "You rats,
You
you
rich! Oh, what was the woman's name as well with the red hair? No Joy, the one that the kind of
I
the
know what you mean.
sidekick.
I can't remember her name.
Oh, she always flicks a knife at you.
Yeah,
She was a pain in the ass. But see, working your way like obviously through the buildings and Shenmue II, because you've got to it's Yandu Zud that you've got to try and
yeah.
rescue.
You have to find him. Yeah,
You've got to work your way up. Those goddamn
beams.
fuck those goddamn beams, mate. Honestly, oh that took some patience to get through them. Honestly, but even like you can talk about the levels whenever you're way in, you can round the kind of corridor. You've got the QTEs with the goons kind of walking
Yeah,
about, and if you fail them, then you've got to actually fight them.
yeah,
You know, but aye, the stuff whenever you're handcuffed to then is hilarious. Obviously, like kind of a bit kind of stealth based. Those parts as well. We try to kind of sneak by kind of groups of guards and whatnot to make your way up. But aye, it's just aye, and the big guy, big fucking Don Yu, just whenever he appears, you're like, mate, I just kicked you down a lift shaft or something like 5 minutes ago. How can you possibly be back?
I know. It just keeps
Like,
coming, doesn't it?
oh, mate, honestly, like a Terminator.
Yeah, there is so much more combat when you get to that point because
Aye.
you've got all the battles around. There's a bit of combat in Disc One and Two when you're kind of in Hong Kong and like Aberdeen and stuff. But then when you get to Disc Three, there's a lot of it. And you get kind of the Colosseum as well, don't you? Where
Mm,
you can fight people for money as well. So you go, if you want to fight a fighting RPG, that's the that's the stage of the game that really delivers it, and
mm.
it just delivers on all aspects again, just like the first one, but obviously doing something different, and you go down. And you just like into that bit where you go into the underground arena and there's all like broken rocks
Yes.
and rubble everywhere. You go, there's the fight. I've got to go over there. I've got to fight them. But there's an afterburner cabinet over there.
Randomly sitting there in absolutely pristine condition,
Yeah.
looking glorious.
Oh, it's just it's so good. And then obviously the climactic battle with Dong Yu on top of the skyscraper as Landy's hanging from the helicopter is just it's just a masterpiece. And I think the two games really complement each other really well because they both tell an ongoing story, but they're different enough that I really can't pick between the two.
I think it's a difference between the kind of smaller scale of the first game, which is mixed with that kind of intimacy and kind of familiarity. It's Ryu's little community. As you say, it feels kind of walled garden, kind of safe. But then, he's got to the second game. He's in Hong Kong, and now it's a whole new ball game. He's there on his own, and you do feel that. You do feel that sense of being alone in a far larger world. There's the city kind of area really reminded me of as if it was the early precursor for the Yakuza games as well. Now, yourself, I can't remember what area it is that you go to, but it's a big bustling kind of. It's not overly populated with NPCs or traffic, but it's got the big skyscrapers and the neon lights and the kind of
Mm.
you've got the shopping centre and the arcade stuff, in there as well. But it's just, the kind of sense of scale is ramped right up, and you do have that feeling of being more alone, kind of having to keep your wits about you a bit more.
Yeah.
So that they're two very different experiences. I suppose in a way, you're experiencing it's life through Ryu's eyes, isn't it? You
Yeah.
know, it's basically to say the first game more intimate, less of a threat. Second game, shit's just getting real.
Yeah, because that bit you've got that and you've got that massive arcade right next to it. It's in a really busy like dual carriageway road. There's like cars
Yep.
all going down there, and it's like it's no, you see nothing like that in your sleepy little town in Dubuita. You know, even when you get on the motorbike in the first game, there's not much in the way of traffic. Whereas in this one,
Aye.
it really is like a bustling metropolis that you're kind of lost in with no friends. But the way that it establishes, okay, you don't have your mate Tom at the hot dog stand, and you don't have Ine-san, you don't have Fuke-san, but we're going to introduce these new characters, and it just does it so well that you just like, you know, Joy, Ren, you know, Do-New, you know, it introduces these new friends, these new antagonists, and it just does it in such a brilliant way that you just can't help but be amazed at the kind of the just the skill to tell a story like that and get you so invested in it.
Aye. So all the characters are all so fleshed out and so unique, mate, as you say. And it's also that kind of thing in the second game. It's like, again, to play into that kind of like it's through viewers' eyes. Who do you trust?
Yeah,
Like, are you really a friend here, or are you just going to be a dodgy bastard? It's like, it's
yeah.
so you've still got that, and obviously there's betrayal and friendships that are broken up and friendships that are rekindled, and it's just a brilliant piece of storytelling.
It really is. And in terms of legacy, it's hard to say if it's got as much. It's obviously nowhere near as much legacy as the first game. But what it did was just expand, and I think at the time you could still say that it was a cutting edge video game.
Mhm.
There were some magazines that reviewed it better than the first because of the improvements that they perceived. You know, larger world, more action orientated story. You could advance the time if you wanted to. Not that I don't think I ever did because there's just again there was so much to do. Um, so yeah, it was refinement and expansion, I think, rather than kind of changing the industry like the first one. You can't change the industry every single game, but it was still kind of cutting edge, I would say.
I can't reinvent the wheel that close together. You know what I mean? It's like kind of two peas in a pod. Essentially. I mean, I suppose it was meant to be one kind of large game, wasn't it? And they split
Yeah,
it into two because always remember the kind of the bus journey up to Kowloon. That was one of the early kind of demo cutscenes that you seen for, or the kind of early screenshots for the what we thought was going to be in the first game. How come that never ever happens? Well, it happens in the second game. He got there eventually, but it's it didn't do anything innovative, but expecting it to break ground again so soon after the revolution that was the first game, it just took everything and just turned the notch up, mate. Just turned the volume right up on it. Scale, everything phenomenal.
yeah. It's funny when you think about it now because yeah, I remember you see Shenmue in the opening of the first game. Don't ever meet her in in that game. Then you must remember like back in the day there was so much promotional material for Shenmue with Ren of the Heavens in there, who's not in the game at all.
How come I never seen that guy?
Where's
They've,
the guy with the bandana?
they've left a disc out in my pack or something here, Moose.
I think one
What's
of the
happened?
first things I did was I was like, "Oh, there he is," thinking that was Chai, and then I was like, "No, hang on a second, that guy's got a bandana and a normal face." Yeah.
Oh man, brilliant.
So two absolute blockbusters. I mean, I've got my copy here, not as worn as the first one because I didn't play it. Obviously I played the first one about 10 times before I got that one, but still pretty worn. But now we'll move on to this one, which I've played and you haven't, Shenmue 3. So this one, very interesting in how it came about. Over 15 years, people have been waiting for some news on Shenmue. You know, Obviously the originals had failed commercially on the Dreamcast. Then it came to Xbox, and that didn't sell well at all. It's one of those ones where I kind of lament it being on Xbox only because it probably would have done better if it was on the PlayStation 2. And I think there was news recently that there are prototypes of the first game on PlayStation 2 that never made it to
Aye.
never made it to production. But I think the game probably would have done pretty well on that platform, but it is what it is. So Shenmue 3 was announced at Sony's kind of dream E3, wasn't it? That was the one where they were like, here's Final Fantasy VII Remake, and here's um God, what is that game called with the dragon? The one from the Team Ico devs. God, I can't remember what it's called now. But here's that Team Ico game that we call Trico or whatever. And then here's Shenmue 3, which was announced as a Kickstarter, not as a. Although it was it was an interesting one how it kind of came about because Sony somehow had kind of exclusivity on it and were partially funding it, but it still went to Kickstarter. Obviously, smashed all the Kickstarter records, got funded really quickly, made quite a lot of the stretch goals. PS4 and PC. And then on PC, got taken away from Steam because Epic's Game Store had paid some money
Oh, I
for
remember
exclusivity
that.
on there.
Aye.
So it was like all of a sudden the key that you're going to get is for Epic Game Store and not not for Steam. Which, funny enough, is I got the PS4 version I've got there. I bought a while back, pretty cheap. I do mean to play through it on PS4, but the version that I've got on PC is still sealed because I never had to take that out of the case because I got the key for it over email. Um,
It's mad, isn't it? Really.
yeah. But you never played this one, did you, mate? So, I mean, from my perspective, from playing it myself, I enjoyed it. I did enjoy it because it kind of took me back, but I don't think it was kind of an anachronism. It was sort of. It's like if you made a Resident Evil game today with tank controls, fixed cameras, and static backgrounds. It tickled that nostalgia button. It's like this is kind of almost how I remembered it, but it wasn't. You know, Shenmue wasn't at that point the most advanced video game there was anymore. It wasn't kind of that blockbuster. This was now an indie project. Uh, I did like the Guilin part, kind of you're in the sleepy Chinese area, kind of continuation from the last section on Shenmue 2, and then when you get into the kind of the town, it kind of steps up a bit. So I really did enjoy my time with it, apart from the crappy stamina
I've
thing.
heard about that.
Yeah, you have to reach. Rio gets tired, so you have to eat stuff to recharge his stamina. Funny thing is, though, mate, is the thing that recharges the most stamina is cloves of garlic, and they're pretty fairly affordable. So I'd like do jobs cutting wood or something. Funny thing is, when you do some of these mini games, like you get stuff like Afterburner kicking in, music kicking in when you're doing really well. So that was pretty good. But I don't have money chopping wood. Go over and buy loads of cloves of garlic. You imagine Rio's walking around stinking like an Italian restaurant.
It's just like, nobody coming within 10 foot of him.
Just eating cloves of garlic, like that
Maybe I
packet,
should have another.
eating them like they're like crisps.
Aye, packet of polos in his pocket, try and freshen that breath up, man.
Like
No.
Shenhua, and it's
Have a word, mate. No.
yeah. I mean,
See,
what was your thoughts from seeing it, mate?
I mean, the first thing that annoys me about Shenmue 3, mate, is I don't like Ryo's face model.
Yeah,
I just it's not Ryo Hazuki. Like, why didn't you just take the face model from the Shenmue Passport, the high resolution, higher polygon count face model for the Dreamcast's Shenmue Passport, and use that? It's not him. Like, it's him in terms of how it looks and kind of general design, as in face, plaster, hairstyle, but the shape of his face is this. It's not him, and that just rips you straight out. It's not him. So, like, I know obviously there was the whole thing with the Kickstarter, and the talk is that Sony, as we've said, they kind of helped to fund it. They had a wee kind of backhander in there. And it's always kind of irked me to see that Shenmue ended up becoming, I know it's on PC, but for it to become like console exclusive on PlayStation just feels like kind of one of those kind of final acts of betrayal. It's like, I would have liked to at least seen it go to like Xbox as well, just so, because end of the day, if Yu Suzuki is all about wanting fans to, experience the continuation of the story, then why limit it to one platform or one console? Because not everybody who had a Dreamcast will have a PlayStation at this point in time. So, but then again, I wouldn't go out and buy a PS4 or get a PC just to play Shenmue 3. And I think it does, from my perception, looking at it, it does have, it's lost that kind of blockbuster appeal. It has got a very much an indie feel, pardon me, about it. And I think it shows. Like the arcade games, I believe there's nothing licensed in there. Of course, Yu Suzuki has long departed from Sega. He's an advisor or whatnot now, but he's not actually in the building, so to speak. So there's no licenses there for them to put any kind of actual arcade games. Obviously, Yakuza kind of picked up on that mantle and ran with it and have continued
Yeah.
to do so big time. But I just never. It's came out. It's too late. I think, as you said, what made Shenmue so alluring was not just the story and the characters and the depth, but it was the fact that it was so, you know, ahead of its time. It was doing things that hadn't been done before, whereas now it had gone from being the innovator to playing catch up.
Yeah.
And I think Shenmue's problem now, I think, is that while the community is brilliant as it is and as loud as it is pushing so hard to try and get like the fourth game, which will come to, in the grand scheme of gaming now, because I think of that delay between 2 and 3, and obviously the fact that the first two games were, well, obviously Shenmue 2 kind of get locked to Xbox in the US, but it, because of all that, it's become kind of niche,
Yeah.
and I think that's a big part of the problem with it. Like, and I say we'll come to Shenmue 4. We've got a lot of views on the whole kind of let's get Shenmue 4 thing as well, but I think Shenmue 3 is one of these games where I don't think I'll ever play it. And then part of me doesn't want to play it. I don't think it would give me any, like, I don't think it would add anything. Like I can read the story to see where it goes. I don't think experiencing the game that far ahead as a continuation to just playing two, in fact, or not just playing two, but I've played two obviously back in the day, but finishing two in the summer, or more or less finishing it, getting to the final disc, I don't think it would add anything. Like, if anything, it may detract from it a wee bit. It might dilute things because you've just went from recently experiencing the absolute peak of Yu Suzuki's vision for the game, and then you're coming all the way down to this indie Kickstarter game. I think it would be quite a come down. So, in that regard, mate, I'm quite happy to kind of give it a buy.
Yeah. I mean, as a continuation from the second game, I think it very much is what you'd need in terms of, if you were playing a kind of a version of a Dreamcast game back in the day, I guess. The visuals aren't massively advanced. The gameplay still has the same kind of tank controls as the original game, plays very much similar. The combat has been changed. Um, kind of mixed on certain bits, whether it's better or not. I can't really decide. Some of it's good, it's very fluid. Some of it's, but on the other hand, the way that you pull your moves out feels a little bit stunted. Um, Overall, it's not a bad game. Should you go out and buy a PS4 for it? No, that's certainly not a game that's worth that. But if you're a Shenmue fan, and if you've lived those two games, there's plenty in there for you. I mean, it plays like them. You've got, very similar. It feels on brand, but it just feels like a game out of time. There's
Mm.
loads of brilliant stuff, especially as you get to like the second area, and you meet the guys that you met in the first two games. You can ring up kind of Ine-san. You can ring up your girlfriend from the first game, whose name is Nozomi. Who's
Mm.
You can ring her up, see how she's doing in Canada. Um, but it does. Like you say, mate. It's not blockbuster like the first two games were, and it's an odd one, isn't it? Because as you say, mate, it feels niche, and maybe Shenmue is niche. But then you look at how Shenmue sold, and maybe Shenmue always was niche in terms of its appeal. And I think that probably brings us nicely on to talking about what the future of Shenmue is. And there's probably a few things to touch on outside the Shenmue 4 side of things. Firstly, is the owner of the publishing rights to Shenmue 3 has now changed. Whether that means that we're going to get an Xbox port, I don't know. I'd like it. I'd like there to be a Switch 2 or Xbox port because if this series is going to go anywhere, then it needs as many eyes on it as possible. It can't just
Yeah.
become its own, caught in its in games on it now. It can't just become caught in its own bubble. It needs to expand, which I think is the series' problem, really. It's caught in this niche with a very dedicated, very vocal, but comparatively small audience. Um, so it would be great to bring Shenmue into the hands of more people, whether it's Switch or Xbox. Um, there's the rumored reboot, and then of course there's Shenmue 4. Now Shenmue 3 ends pretty well. The last act I think is brilliant, even though you don't get the climax. You basically, spoiler alert, Ryo meets Landy, fights and gets his ass handed to him. But the way it's done is, I think, is pretty spectacular. So obviously there needs to be a Shenmue 4, but it's how do you progress the series? How do you expand it in the here and now? Really, is it even possible?
See, I think you see a lot of it, like people badgering Sega on socials to do something with it, right? And the problem that I think we have now is that because of how the third game was made, with it being a Kickstarter slash kind of indie game, is that would Sega, as how they are now, Sega Sammy, led by Utsumi, would they be happy to basically pick up someone else's work? It's not as if it's their Shenmue anymore. It's always been Yu Suzuki Shenmue, but it's now we've got Shenmue 3 with Yu Suzuki living outside Sega. So would Sega take on someone else's, other work to try and pick up on it? I don't think they would. I don't think RGG Studio would pick up the baton and just pick up where they left off, which then leads you to the reboot. So do you then just basically decide to go, right, we'll just remake the game from scratch? Now we've seen that Final Fantasy VII's been redone in modern technology. You've got Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which basically has visuals that are even beyond Advent Children. We all looked at back in the day and went, "Oh, it never looked that good to play it." Well, it looks better than that now. But they've split that whole game over 3 huge games of its own. I've been talking to Jason about it, and the size of that game is mind numbing. The 3 parts to it. So
can't split Shenmue up anymore, can you imagine? Instead of 3 discs, we'll have 9.
It's on 12 discs. Fuck. It's but that's the only way I could see Sega and RGG ever touching it, would be if they went, right, you know what, we're just going to bring it kicking and screaming into the modern day and start it over. But then again, it's do they want to invest the time in doing that? Because they're already so heavily invested in Yakuza. And you sense there's a bit of resentment towards Yakuza, I think, as well. I think there's a feeling amongst a lot of Shenmue fans that Yakuza has stolen the limelight and the progression that Shenmue would have got. It's almost like a kind of pretender. You can see Shenmue's influence in Yakuza. It's there for all to see. Yakuza has pretty much, I think it's just the evolution of Shenmue. But I think there is that kind of wee bit of resentment to Yakuza in a way. But I think the only way that you're going to see a Shenmue 4 would be if it is part of a reboot where they just basically build it from scratch, and it all comes down to A, budget, B, demand, C, financial viability. It's whether Sega want to take that on amongst everything else that they're doing and commit to that, which again goes back to that kind of niche audience that Shenmue has. And I'm not saying that Shenmue's niche is an insult to it. We're niche. This channel is niche. The Sega retro community is niche. Retro gaming is niche in the grand scheme of modern gaming. We're a little tiny speck in the ocean to the wider kind of gaming audience. But it's, you've got to admire the kind of the persistence and the passion of the Shenmue community. You know, you get the Shenmue Dojo guys who are following this show, obviously. So I get to say that. I wanted to say that, you know, because it's also been on before them. But they've done the whole thing with kind of Times Square and getting the big adverts put up and all that, and they're pushing for it. But and it's whether Sega want to listen. It's whether Sega think it's viable and financially, you know, to their benefit to actually do it. Is Shenmue still relevant enough to get modern gamers excited about a reboot to sell the numbers in kind of Yakuza levels to make it viable? And that's where I think the doubt is. I don't think it does.
Yeah, I think Sega are very wary, but obviously Sega have been severely burned by the original games, and I think their relationship with Yu Suzuki is there because you saw him on the VF Direct. They obviously got
Yep.
him in. They've got to still maintain a very close relationship. There are, rumors that he is advising on certain games. He might be advising on the new Virtua Fighter game. We don't know. Um, but would they pick up his Shenmue project? I think the challenge is that you've got the Shenmue fan base loyal, and I count myself as a Shenmue fan. But obviously, I've got the PAL version of the Dreamcast games. I've got NTSC version of the Dreamcast games. The third game I've got on PC and on PS4. I've got the Xbox remastered version, and I've played through them all except for the PS4 version of 3. Played through them all, and the thing is, we're very dedicated, obviously, but that's not enough. You can't. Shenmue collection, the one and two collection, sold I think three times as many copies as Shenmue 3. Shenmue 3 was like a massive sales up, even after the Kickstarter stuff. The thing you find is that you're selling to a kind of a diminishing fan base, and a lot of that fan base was actually burnt by Shenmue 3. So how do you repair that? I think is the question. How do you repair that and make a viable product that's ready to sell? I don't think Sega see it as a viable product because they would have done it already. We've got all sorts of reboots of all, Skies of Arcadia got trademarked. That is a very niche game. That didn't sell in loads of copies. Very well thought of game, outstanding game, but in terms it's never been a million seller. That's why the Dreamcast version goes for about 100 quid and the GameCube one goes for about 200 because no one bought them. you know. And Sega have thought, well, you know what? Skies of Arcadia is well thought of. Let's try and bring that back. But they haven't thought about bringing Shenmue back. But what are Toku Studio doing? Well, they're doing Virtua Fighter, which has been away for nearly 20 years. They're doing obviously Yakuza. Pirates is coming out this month, February, at the time of recording. And then there'll obviously be the next big entry into the Yakuza franchise. And then there's Project Century. What's Project Century? It's a brand new IP. So you're telling me that rather than invest and use the Yakuza technology for Shenmue, they're developing something brand new, which potentially has more risk than using a legacy IP. Now, I do think that Yakuza and Shenmue, in terms of structure, coalesce now. When you play the original PS2 games, they play nothing like Shenmue, like the Yakuza games. They're nothing like Shenmue. They're almost like top down in some places. They're like fixed
Mm.
camera angles. They're not fully open world. They play like action games, whereas it started becoming more like Shenmue around Yakuza 3. But seeing Yakuza evolve, and Yakuza really has, I think that's something that people forget as well. Yakuza was niche for a while. You had the first game that had, an all-star cast of English voice actors doing the dub. You had Mark Hamill doing his
I can't
Joker.
believe that when you showed me that, by the way.
Yeah, you got Mark Hamill doing his Joker impression as Majima. You got Michael Madsen as one of the characters as well. But it didn't sell at all well in the UK or the US or the West at all. And to the point that the second one wasn't dubbed at all. The third one had a very limited release, and I think the fifth one, Sony had to release it themselves because Sega weren't willing to put the money behind it. And it wasn't until Yakuza Zero that this franchise finally took off. Now, are Sega willing to do that with Shenmue and keep, kicking the door down until we get a result? I'm not sure, but I think for Shenmue, there's two options really, as I see it. You either just finish the story, well, just finishing the story achieve it. It's not going to achieve massive sales. It is going to satisfy our Shenmue fans because we get to see Ryo finally catch Landy and defeat him. But you're going to get a game that potentially is going to be to the scale of Shenmue 3. Or do you completely reboot the series and put it in the Yakuza mold and hope that you can grab some buyers that way and expand the audience that way? Maybe you can. It won't be the Shenmue that we knew and loved anymore, but it will at least be what Shenmue should have always been, is blockbuster and cutting edge.
Aye. I mean, if they did that, that would be an interesting way to actually approach it. If they did reboot it, though, would be to actually see. I never actually thought of that. I'm thinking of just rebooting it kind of as it is, but modernising it. But I actually making it in that kind of Yakuza framework. Now, it would be more combat based for a start, but it would bring it kind of kicking and screaming into kind of modern times. So, like you said, it might be a case of Sega, if they were to do that, they're maybe going to capture some of that Yakuza audience. But again, as you said, mate, they're doing too much. RGG have got far too much on to take Shenmue on at this point anyway. And then as you said, VF6, Project Century, Yakuza games. Where do they find the time to fit it in? That's the problem. As
Yeah.
you said, Sega themselves don't see it as viable. And again, it kind of goes back a wee bit to what Sumi was saying about kind of, embracing modern gamers. Do
Yeah.
modern gamers want Shenmue? I don't think
Well,
they do.
when I
You
was
know,
thinking about Shenmue 3, Shenmue 3 is a retro game. It's a game out of time. It is not
yep.
it's not even kind of because I was going to say it's like a Sonic maybe, but Sonic and Sonic Superstars, but Sonic's gameplay is kind of timeless and hasn't aged. The way that Shenmue 3 plays, I appreciate it. As I said, I enjoyed it, but it is a game out of time. It is a retro game for a place that is not a retro company.
Well, that's that phrase again. How many times are we going to say that in 2025? It's going to become a buzz phrase.
Yeah. I mean,
Oh,
so I don't see Sega getting involved really, although they still own the IP. So, they'll have a say, but they'll probably just license it out for whatever, for some money, or maybe because Yu Suzuki's still got a close relationship with them. So, but I can't see Sega funding it. Now, the alternative is obviously in games doing something, maybe, but they're not a large scale publisher. They're not going to fund a big AAA or even AA game. It's going to be kind of Shenmue 3 level. So I don't know, mate. I'd love to see it, but the more you think about the practicalities of it, you know, we'd want to finish the story, but can you ever imagine anyone bringing Shenmue back to its glory? And I don't know. Maybe from me, and maybe it's a bit selfish. I'd rather see Shenmue brought back to its glory than just arbitrarily finish the story. I think that's just my personal view.
aye.
It's just it's
And
like
that's what a reboot would probably do it the most justice in.
yeah, I think so. And it won't be. It probably will be. Yakuza's got all kind of quest markers and fast travel, and it'll be littered with that. Maybe there's options to filter it out, but you could really make it just accessible. Shenmue isn't accessible anymore. And you're not going to get people invested in the fourth chapter of a niche game. You're
Mm.
going to get diminishing returns.
And that's the thing that the fan base deserves to see the story finished. Let's not
Yeah,
forget that. I think for the dedication that's been shown for decades,
yeah,
they deserve to see the story come to its climax. They deserve to see Rio get his justice. That's what basically that's what everyone wants to see. It's just he finally gets his hands on Landine, kick seven shades of shit at him,
Yeah,
basically, But I think if that is denied to the Shenmue fan base, that in itself would be a crime, So it's that kind of it's the balancing act. It's like you know that the fan base deserve to see the story finished. They deserve to see a conclusion, but they're only going to get that if Sega decide to invest in it and invest that kind of time through RGG in either rebooting it or finishing it off. And that's the problem. It's getting them to recognise that there's value in that, but the only way they're going to have value in that is if they modernise it. But if you modernise it, then you might lose the soul of the original game, which means it's not the game that it was before. So it's like, where
yeah,
where do it's a shame. It's like so many of Sega's IPs, and I think that's one thing they're guilty of. We've said it so many times on here, is that they either leave things lying for too long, or they just don't bother with them at all, and they let them
yeah,
just rot. And I think Shenmue 3 had to go to Kickstarter with a wee bit of help by Sony, because Sega were never going to bother with it, even though, as we said, Yu Suzuki's left and his own company and whatnot now, but he's got those kind of close ties. But those close ties still weren't enough to get Sega to back him.
yeah.
They had to go to the
Sega,
enemy,
yeah, Sega weren't involved at all.
you know.
Um, yeah, and even if it's not Sega, who else would it be? Inning Games are the publisher of Shenmue 3 at the moment, and Shenmue was supposed for the foreseeable, but they're not a big software house. Who else has an adaptable open world third person engine that could be translated to Shenmue? Who else is there? I don't know. Ubisoft are going through.
Playground games. Give it to Microsoft Game
Okay,
Studios.
right. Whoa,
That's
okay.
There you go. Once you're finished with Fable, guys, you can make a new Shenmue game. There we
Oh, that's
go.
interesting. Yeah, that would be interesting. I think, yeah, the Shenmue community absolutely deserves to see the story come to a conclusion, but I would argue that it needs to be a satisfying conclusion. I think Shenmue 3 did very well. The last act, and the battle in the castle is fantastic, albeit it's not it's not up there. The actual conclusion has to be better, I think. It has to be. It has to be Shenmue in its final glory, not kind of a Shenmue tribute act almost. It has to be what
Aye,
Shenmue was in the beginning. It has to be blockbuster.
you can't Last Jedi Shenmue. You know what I mean? Don't turn Rio into a Luke Skywalker for Disney. You know what I mean? You've got to let him go out all guns blazing, getting his revenge, proper style. So,
Yeah. But mate, as you say, the dojo and the rest of the Shenmue community do great stuff. Hashtag Let's Get Shenmue 4. People can still keep pushing. And yeah, I really hope that we get something. But the sad thing is, I just don't see it being viable. But we'll keep dreaming, mate. We never thought Shenmue 3 would happen. We got something. Maybe
that's it,
with all
mate.
these resurrected IPs, maybe one day we'll get a
And,
reboot or something
and
with the
if
Dragon engine.
that's it, mate. And if Playground Games do announce Shenmue 4, then I want kudos for it.
I mean, they did mention Shenmue on they did mention Shenmue on the Virtua Fighter Direct.
Well,
Um,
aye.
because I watched the Virtua Fighter Direct, and then I watched Maximilian Dude's reaction to it. And when Yu Suzuki said Shenmue, he went, Shenmue mentioned! Shenmue mentioned!
Aye. As I say, it would be a shame for yet more years and decades to pass and there's no conclusion.
Yeah,
Like, that would be criminal. But one of the biggest crimes in gaming, I think, if that story is not finished, but the problem is convincing someone that it's a viable option to do so.
finish
And
it. Finish
that's
it
a
well.
challenge.
Yeah.
As this was it Halo 2, finish the fight.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, the fight is just keep treating hashtag Let's Get Shenmue 4. So don't want to end on too much of a bum note with that one, mate. But we'll keep
I
dreaming.
know.
But obviously, that's our thoughts on it, mate. And as we started with the last podcast, one of the things that we're allowing our Akira All Access members to do now is get involved with their own thoughts, questions on the show itself and on the topic at hand. So I don't know if you wanted to read the the comments that we got on today's show, mate?
Yeah, certainly. So, yes, what we do now for the all access members is put a members only post up on the channel just to kind of make them aware of the topic we're going to be discussing and get some kind of opinions. So, we've got Greg Matthews and Tom Fum who have sent us a couple in. Cheers, guys. So, Greg says one of the things that sticks with me most about Shenmue is the pre release hype around it and how hard it was to even grasp what we were getting. It almost didn't seem real. You looked at these unbelievably gorgeous screenshots and couldn't quite believe what you were seeing. You read the write ups in magazines of what the game was, the freedom and depth that it would offer in this world, and it was hard to even comprehend. It can't be overstated that we'd literally never seen anything like Shenmue at the time, which is perhaps one of the reasons it ultimately didn't sell as well as Sega had hoped. Its uniqueness made it almost unquantifiable without experiencing it for yourself. So you either bought into the promise and the mystery of what Shenmue could be, or were confused and skeptical and left it well alone. That's a great point.
Yeah.
I was very much in the former camp and consumed every screenshot and morsel of information before buying it day one. I've been in love with it ever since and still play through the game regularly, discovering new things and soaking up its intoxicating atmosphere.
Brilliant, he said.
Aye, that's that here. I should be at the View.
Yeah, it touches on a lot of the points that we did there. It's a brilliant post. Kind of sums up how we were talking, when we were talking about the pre-release hype. Um, but yeah, I think Greg's hit the nail on the head there, mate.
I think to use a Scottish phrase, that certainly got the plums pumping, mate. It's,
So, Greg,
uh,
you know you love your Sega, mate. I think you deserve a job on the Sega marketing team trying to get Shenmue going.
that's it, mate. Just send him to Japan with that. You know what I mean? Be writing them checks. He said intoxicating. Just give him the money.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Uh,
And we've got one more, haven't we, mate?
Yeah, so good friend Tom Fum. So he says Shenmue is a fantastic game. It blew my mind back in the day at the experience it gave you. Then two knocked it up to another level. I never finished two as I was too shit at fighting and couldn't make the money in the fights to progress. I got three when it came out and I was sorely disappointed with it. And now they want to make a four. I don't know. I think the series that should have lived, I think it's a series that should have lived and died on Dreamcast. The world has moved on, but Shenmue hasn't, and that's a real shame.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think yeah, you get that's what I described Shenmue 3 as. It's a Dreamcast game, but on modern systems. It should have been on Dreamcast, and I'd argue that it probably should have lived, and the story should have been finished on Dreamcast. And now it feels, as I say, it feels like something out of time. Um, it does feel like the world has moved on, and Shenmue hasn't. It's a great point. And I think that's the real struggle that we were talking about just now.
Yep,
Where I think a reboot probably is what it needs to, because as I say, Tom right there, he's someone that bought the third one and probably wouldn't buy the fourth. So you got those diminishing returns and the viability. I think
just
you
back to
just,
what you said about being burned by the third game.
yeah,
How do you get that back?
yeah. How do you recover from that? So, it sounded like Tiger King. Now, I'm never going to financially recover from this. No, yeah, I think you really do just have to, if you were Sega or if you were someone trying to do something with Shenmue, I think you do kind of have to reboot it. Or I think Yu Suzuki was talking about making maybe a prequel that might get some people interested.
Mm,
But I think the third game probably needs a big update. I haven't played it in years. I've only played through it once, but I think it probably needs to be made more accessible in order for people to kind of buy in, even if there was a prequel that got their blood pumping, because they go, oh, this is amazing, and they go into the third game and they're like, ugh. Are they still going to buy the fourth one? Probably not. So yeah, there we go. Some good views there, mate. So that was a cracking chat. I think we probably could have talked a lot more, especially about those first two games as well. We would never have got the kind of the rest of the conversation in, which is, I think that's kind of it's been good because it's a different view. I think I don't hear too many obviously the dojo are great, the way that they talk about Shenmue, but I think getting our perspective on what the future means and what it could mean for the franchise and how viable it is, I think it's good to have that chat and get our view out there. Even
Yeah.
if when I listen to it back, it's probably going to sound quite depressing.
Aye, but I think the chat has pretty much mirrored Shenmue's life. You know, if you think about it, like, honestly, you've got the highs of the expectation, then you've got the excitement at what you were seeing, then being blown away by this level of immersion and depth, and then the kind of sadness of watching that not really be embraced by the wider gaming community. And then we've got that kind of plateau of the Kickstarter version of Shenmue 3, the struggle to try and get Shenmue 4 and get the story finished. So I think the pod and the chat has pretty much mirrored the trajectory of the game itself, the series itself, mate.
Yeah, it's a good point. What it has made me want to do though is I need to play through these games again. So I think that's what I'm going to start. But I already whetted my appetite for it by playing the second one on Xbox. Um, and I was just like, well, it doesn't feel quite right, and I'm not a big fan of the dub, as I said, but there was enough in there to make me feel right. I need to go back to the first one and play through all three and finally unwrap that PS4 version. But that'll do us for now, mate. Viewers and listeners, love to hear what your thoughts on this legendary series are. What are your thoughts on the legacy of the first two games? What were your thoughts on the divisive third game? Did you enjoy it like I did? Or were you not impressed with it? Were you disappointed? Let us know in the comments below or on one of the Discords, whether it's Radio Sega or the SEGAGuys Discord or the Shiro Discord. If you've made it to the end of the video on YouTube, thank you very much for staying with us. If you could give us a like or a subscribe or both, that would really help the channel. We are on our way to 10,000 subscribers. Maybe we'll be there by the time this comes out. I don't know, but it's unbelievable that we're even close to it right now. So thanks to each and every one of you for watching, liking, and subscribing. And if you want to be extra mega, why don't you become a member with a bunch of awesome perks from as little as 99p? And at certain membership tiers, you can get your name read out as a thank you, like James is going to do for our Akira All Access members right now.
The unit and our all access members for today's show are G-Man, Steph Peaks, Mikowski, Craig Williamson, Sega Saturn, Shiro, Resident SD, P-Wall, Tom Fum, Peter 007. We have Andy Mackey, Nick Tullock, Greg Matthews, Craig Sayer, and David Owens. Thank you very much to all of our members and subscribers for your continued support. It is very much appreciated as we move into our 5th year of the SEGAGuys. So thank you very much for all your support going forward.
Indeed, mate. 5 years. There's still plenty more to come. Until next time, everyone, in the words of Yu Suzuki, I see you on the Sega side.
Sega!